Across your introductory remarks, for which I thank you. You've each spoken of important constructive responses to difficult dynamics, whether in diplomacy, development, responding to oppression, religious strife, or otherwise. And I want to turn to a figure who's had a role in at least two of our institutions, USIP and George Mason, Jim Lowery. For those who don't know the name Jim Lowery, James Lowery was very active in the civil rights movement and in empowering groups who sought constructive change in society. But one of the things that Jim brings forth in almost all of his writings, Jim passed away now, I'm going to say 25 years ago or so. I had the good fortune of studying with him a bit. Again, some of my students recognize his articles, I'm guessing. But he would open his articles by disclaiming his values and saying, the approach I'm going to set forth here are grounded in these values. And he would be clear about these matters. I'd like to turn that question to our panelists, which is, given the types of challenging work and difficult dynamics you encounter, what motivates your work? What values animate the efforts you bring to the work you do? So if I could start in the middle this time, Gary, what comes forth for you? What values animate your work?
So that's a great question, and I'm thinking at different levels, but one of the things we talk about is boldness with humility. And as a social entrepreneurial organization, we want to be bold in terms of gathering the insights and responding to those in new and entrepreneurial ways, and in terms of how do we nudge the global capital markets towards the poor. And we have to be bold to do that, but the humility comes in different ways, right? Instead of just going out and proclaiming that we have an insight and that our idea is better, we take the perspective of let's build the evidence base. So with water credit, we didn't just go out and say this is the way to go. We did it incrementally. We built the evidence base. We showed that at the end of the day, we could take $1 in philanthropy and leverage it into $35 in commercial capital. We showed that poor people would take out loans and they would repay them at a 99% rate. So it's building on that evidence base that allows us to continue to go out and grow really rapidly. It took us from 1990 until 2012 to reach the first 1 million people that we reached through water.org. We, because of the Water Credit Initiative, now reach 4 million people every year. So that's the evidence base. So we can be bold, but then we can back that up with the evidence and be humble. The other piece is, we are approached all the time about solving this water situation or that water situation. I mean, we were asked not too long ago to help solve the crisis around the Indus River between Pakistan and India, largely because, Matt's known for being a dominant player in this space, Matt Damon, and so we were approached to do that, and I'm like, we can't solve the problem between India and Pakistan, so we have to be a little bit humble in terms of what we can do, figuring out the insights that we have that others may not have seen yet, and using those to leverage the social impact that we can, and then having a little bit of humility to stand back from those water issues that others can better solve.
Great. Carla, if I could turn to you the same question, which values animate your efforts in your work?
So, U.S. Institute of Peace is dedicated to ending violent conflict writ large, and with that proposition, we have to bear in mind that we are small, mighty, but small. And so there are two ways that we approach our work. One is through direct action. So there are programs where we are directly involved in ending violent conflict. Colleagues were involved in making sure that the successful peace process in Colombia with the FARC involved the inclusion of women, involved the inclusion of ethnic minorities, really created an inclusive foundation for peace and prosperity in that country moving forward. We're directly engaged in thinking through how you approach peace negotiations if those are to eventuate with the Taliban in Afghanistan. How do you return security on the ground? We're working directly through facilitators that we train in Iraq and in Tunisia to de-escalate local conflict in ways that avoid military intervention and save lives even as they're trying to separate warring parties. And we're actively engaged across West Africa in trying to stem radicalization and address violent extremism. But we are small, and so what we really try to do is to pair that direct action with the research and learning that enables us to then promulgate the approaches that we use successfully on the ground to both the academy and through education and training, and also by collaborative work with governments around the world. So when we work on for example, how you animate nonviolent movements in ways that lead to transformation in societies around the world, we will both do the direct training in what the most effective, optimized techniques are for nonviolent movements to gain traction, and also create the capacity on the ground to then have a multiplier effect in others, so that there are trainers in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Uganda, et cetera, who are then able to carry this forward. Our goal is to take what we learn, to promulgate it more widely, and to enable ourselves to have a really transformative effect that saves lives and really optimizes both the kind of learning and the kind of action on the ground that will enable conflict or violent conflict to come to an end in both individual conflicts and writ large. And our hope is that our impact then can be much larger than simply the direct work that we undertake individually.
Thank you very much.